You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Finds Devil May Cry in MHA. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Speckters on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Deeper the darkness around you, the brighter the light is when it comes around. All Might had finally arrived at the Dome. The students' desperate faces become hopeful once the symbol of peace made his way through the smoke of the destroyed door he broke on the way in. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong here when Aizawa and 13 didn't answer my calls. So, I hurried over, running into young Ida on the way. He told of the villainy at work here. All Might said. He could not believe all of this was happening while he was resting his quirk. He hated to think what the young people had to go through and how strong his comrades had fought in order to protect them. But the only thing he could do now was to reassure that everything would be okay. That was his duty as the symbol of peace. Have no fear, students. All Might then violently tore of his tie. Because I am here. Multiple villains below started to shake in fear. Holy CRP, it's All Might. I have never seen the guy in person before. I didn't expect him to be so huge. One villain was not so easily scared. HMPH, this is no time to talk. If we strike now, we can kill high. He shouldn't have done that. Just as he finished, the symbol of peace moved at a speed faster than the normal human eye could see and started whacking villains left and right, and in the process get hold of the brutally beaten Mr. Aizawa. I am sorry, Aizawa. All Might whispered. I should have been here. All Might then turned around slowly to see Midoriya and the two others who were near the Nomu and the villain leader Shigaraki. His quirk is anything he touches starts decaying rapidly. In a mere moment, All Might used his quirk and grabbed the students and placed them and their teacher Aizawa away from the villains. One of Shigaraki's hands fell from his head and landed on the ground. Minta, the short student with the sticky ball hair quirk, wondered what happened. What the heck? Everybody back to the entrance. And take Aizawa with you, he doesn't have much time, All Might ordered. The three quickly responded in agreement. Meanwhile, the villain Shigaraki picked up the hand he dropped and placed it on his head again. No. It wasn't supposed to be this way. He is still fast, father. Somehow he managed to hit me. Of course, government relies on violence. I wasn't prepared. I couldn't even see him when he moved. But he is not as fast as I thought. Not as fast as he used to be. I guess it's true after all. All Might really is getting weaker. Midoriya grabbed Aizawa and swung his arms over his shoulder to carry him and then turned to All Might. All Might, you can't. The brain villain took one foe. He thankfully remembered that him and All Might were not exactly alone. I mean, I smashed him, and I didn't break my arm this time. But was not fazed at all. He is too strong. All Might threw up an arm. Young Midoriya. He then turned, expression changed to a glad, confident smile. With two fingers he then formed a V and placed near his face. I got this. Seeing that the symbol of peace was not deterred and ready to fight, Midoriya still reluctantly left with Sue and Minta, getting Aizawa some help. All Might then went to an epic fist fight the Nomu monster, ditching out punches and strikes. However, he began to notice that his attacks were not doing damage to the monster. It don't matter where I hurt you, doesn't it? Shigaraki told the symbol of peace the reason why. That's because Nomu here has shock absorption. All Might. The only way you are going to hurt him is to slowly carve out his flesh. For course, I don't think he lets sit back and do it. You finally met your match. The villain mocked the symbol of peace. All Might had another view on that. Thanks for telling me how to beat him. All I have to do is wear him down, then it's on to you, he said and grabbed the Nomu and suplexed it into the ground, making a big dust cloud. Meanwhile, with the students, those up on the staircase was cheering on the symbol of peace. All right, take that bird brain, that's what you villains get for underestimating him, Sato the sugar-eating student said. His power was he got stronger when he consumed sugar, but also less intelligent. With Midoriya and the others at the foot of the staircase. "Are you guys seeing this?" Minta asked them. And yes, they were. That suplex looks like a huge explosion. All Might is on a whole other level. And he still has to look at his notes when he is teaching, Sue added. Midoriya was in a world of his own at the moment, analyzing the situation. The villains came here to kill him, and now he was engaged in battle, and there was nothing he or any of his fellow students could do to help him. By this point they would just get in the way. Still, he wanted to do something, but he had put his faith in All Might. He was still the hero after all. "Yeah, get him, All Might. Punch him right in the ball," Minta, the student with literal sticky ball on his head, shouted. Maybe we were worried for nothing. All Might's unstoppable. It sure seemed that way. However, Izuku knew the truth. He had read that morning that All Might had been busy and was probably going in there using all of his power. He then suddenly remembered a thing that happened nearly a year ago. It was All Might telling his real state of health. "My respiratory system was completely destroyed. My stomach is gone. All the surgeries had worn me out, and it can't be fixed. Right now, I can only do hero work 3 hours a day. Rest of the time, this is what I look like." Midoriya remembered his way thinner look. He was almost a skeleton. "I am supposed to be the guy who is always smiling, right? I am the symbol of peace. People everywhere have to think I am never afraid. But honestly, kid, I smile to hide the fear inside. It's just a brave face I put on when the pressure is high." Midoriya continued to think. They are cheering him on. But they don't the trouble he was really in. The dust dispersed, and it showed that All Might's suplex had failed. Nomu was going through one of the purple mist villain's portals, and its upper body was grabbing All Might's sides and ticking into them with its fingers, causing great pain to All Might. The students' faces turned terrified again. "Ha! Sorry, that won't work," Shigaraki mocked him again. "Nomu is just as strong as you are, that won't stop him." He then looked to the part of mist that showed yellow eyes. "Nice work, Kurogiri. We got him just where we want him now." The purple mist man Kurogiri then got minimized small portal so it would get even small. Nomu squished harder so All Might would let go and then forced him to beneath the portal so he was stuck between spaces. "Since you are too fast to see with the human eye, Nomu had to restrain you. And once he was pulled you halfway through, I'll close the portal shut. I am going to enjoy tearing you to pieces." Back with Midoriya. He quickly handed over the Aizawa to Sue and charged towards the villains in a desperate attempt to save All Might. Unfortunately, Kurogiri saw him coming and intercepted him. Midoriya was about to be shallowed by his mist. Just then, suddenly, Kurogiri was attacked by the explosive boy Bakugou. "Get the hell out of my way, Deku," he shouted. "Catchin'?" Midoriya shouted back in confusion. Bakugou then proceeded to push down the mist villain into the ground. And also the ground suddenly started to freeze over the right side of the Nomu. It was Todoroki. "One of your poorly trained thugs told me you're here because you think you can kill All Might." All Might then used this opportunity and freed himself from the Nomu's grip and jumped next to Todoroki. Next from side came Kirishima, who tried to hit Shigaraki but missed. DMN, that was going to be cool. He cursed at himself for not hitting. Bakugou gloated off in his temporary DMNCE. "Guess I found your body this time, you smoky BSTRD. The symbol of peace will not be defeated by delinquents like you," Todoroki said to the villains. Midoriya was on the verge of crying of seeing his classmates coming to help, but wiped away the tears and got ready to face the villains. At the bottom PF the staircase was Sue and Minta carefully watching the battle that was only 100 meters away. "Todoroki and Bakugou," Minta said. "And Kirishima too." Asui then remembered the unconscious their teacher they were holding. "Let them handle this," she said, and her Minta were on their way up the stairs. However, they were suddenly stopped once they heard a voice yell to them. "Asui, Minta." They turned to see Kikuchi and a pair of shoes and gloves run towards them, which indicated it was Hagakure, the invisible girl. "Kikuchi, Hagakure, you guys are here?" Sue asked. Both of the girls got to them. "We were with Todoroki until he decided he wanted to fight that thing. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. But I see now maybe it was a good idea he went anyway." The pair of shoes and gloves that were Hagakure squeaked, "Ah, is that Aizawa? Is he dead?" Sue calmed her. "He is still alive, but we need to get him to safety now." Kikuchi stepped towards Minta and grabbed Aizawa. "Minta, let me help." "Sure, be my guest," he said, being glad he didn't have to carry Aizawa anymore. He was super heavy and bleeding all over the place. Kind of gross. Kikuchi got a good hold on Aizawa and began to walk. Atop the staircase was the students Uraraka, Sato, Siro, Soji, Ishido, and the hero 13, who was having a bad day. Uraraka noticed the 4 out of the 5 walking towards the staircase. "Hey, we are up here," she shouted to get them to notice. "It's Uraraka," Sue said. "They are okay. Few are good," Kikuchi commented. Nice to see her fellow classmates weren't dead. "Guys, can you help? Mr. Aizawa is bleeding really bad," Hagakure yelled to them, and they realized she was there too. Atop the staircase, Uraraka and the other began moving down the staircase fast to help out with Aizawa. Meanwhile, Ishido was alone with the heavily damaged 13. 13's voice told Ishido, "Don't worry, All Might will take care of this. When the other teachers get here, it will get dangerous, so find someplace to hide." Ishido replied with a, "Oh, okay." Back with the villains and the symbol of peace. "Kurogiri, how could you let this brat get the best of you?" Shigaraki said to his comrade, who was still laying on the ground and held by the explosive boy Bakugou. He was getting more annoyed by the minute. "You have gotten us into aerial jam." Bakugou wanted to mock Kurogiri too. "You got careless, you dumb villain. It wasn't strong to figure you out. Only certain part of you turns into that smoky warp gate. You use your mist hide your actually body as a kind of distraction. Think that made you safe. But if you didn't have a body, you wouldn't be wearing this neck armor, right? You are not immune to physical damage." Bakugou then did tiny miniature explosions to threaten. "Don't you try anything. If you do, I'll blow up your butt so bad they'll be putting you back together for weeks." "Ooh, that doesn't sound very heroic," Kirishima added. Meanwhile, the leader Shigaraki stood muttering about the current state of the situation. "They have captured the 2 strongest of my men. Kids these days really are amazing. They make the League of Villains look like armatures. Can't have that." He then turned to Nomu, who was not moving a muscle and its right side still frozen. "Nomu," he simply said. The Nomu then made an animalistic screech, and it started moving through the portal, much to the shock of the students and All Might, and especially Todoroki, because he thought he had the thing nailed down. The Nomu struggled and limped until the ice cracked and its right side was falling apart, but it didn't seem to be bothered by it. "How is that thing still moving? He is all messed up," Midoriya asked, shocked. All Might then said, "Stay back, everybody." The Nomu's right side then did something unexpected. It suddenly started to form flesh from the part that were destroyed and form new body parts then and there. "What is this? I thought you said his power was shock absorption." Shigaraki taunted All Might. "I didn't say that was his only quirk. He also has super regeneration. Nomu is designed to take you on even at a 100% power. He is basically a highly efficient punching bag that hits back." The Nomu was then fully healed. "Now we need to free our method of escape. Get him, Nomu." Shigaraki signaled the monster to go after Bakugou, who was holding Kurogiri, and at such a high speed that none of the students could see him coming. Luckily, All Might was just as fast and was able to push Bakugou out the way and take the punch head-on. "Catchin'!" Midoriya screamed until he realized Bakugou was right next to him. "Catchin'? Wow, that's awesome, you dodge it." "Shut up, no, I didn't, you DMN nerd," Catchin angrily sneered back. "Then how did you get over here?" Kirishima asked. However, Todoroki then noticed the Nomu had punched All Might instead, and he was sent into a nearby wall, and said wall had gotten a huge hole in it. "So, he protected the child?" Shigaraki muttered to himself. "These are kids and you didn't hold back?" All Might raised his voice. The dastard villains were really going to kill them. Shigaraki then responded. "I had no choice, he was threatening my companion. Besides, these kids are no angles. The plain-looking one, he tried to kill me with a maxed-out punch. What kind of hero does something like that? You think you can get away with being as violent as you want, if you say it is for the sake of others. Well, you know what, All Might? That pisses me off. Why do people get to decide that some violence are heroic and others are villainous? You think you are the symbol of peace? You are just another government-sponsored instrument of violence. And violence always breeds more violence. I'll make sure the world understands once you are dear. Hey, a new voice sounded, cutting off Shigaraki's speech. The villains, students, and All Might looked behind them to see down from the fire zone came the sword-wielding student come casually walking over to them. Alexander, Midoriya said. Hey, is this where the party is at? Alexander asked, not showing a single slight of fear or worry. I was just taking a stroll around the place when I heard some rumbling coming from over here. What's? Alexander then stopped mid-sentence and also stopped walking when he saw Shigaraki, who was standing looking back at him. Little by little Alexander started to snicker before he then busted into a huge laughter that made him hold his stomach. PHF haha, who the heck is this? He asked his fellow students. Apparently, he found the villain's choice of attire laughable. Kawalksik, that the leader of the villains, Kirishima yelled to him. His laughter was only making them angrier. This is the leader. Ha 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 ha, I am sorry but not really. Your outfit looks dumb as hell ha ha ha. Alexander mocked Shigaraki. The leader villain was getting annoyed. So what's your code name or whatever? I am in no mood for a laughing child, but if you want the name of your pain, I am Shigaraki. And Shigaraki was caught off again. Shigaraki? I think I have a better name for you, Alexander said. Hey everyone, look, it is the evil handyman, and also his trusty bad touchy gang. Oh who is going to stop their villainous hands from touching us? Alexander taunted Shigaraki and the villains. Meanwhile, his classmates thought he was absolutely insane. That did for Shigaraki. No one and absolutely no one was going to insult him in this manner. You know, I am already getting really tired of you. Nomu, attack him. Nomu charged at Alexander at a freighting speed. Midoriya and the others all screamed at him to dodge out the way. Get away from him. Alexander, run. Don't just stand there. All Might was worried and wanted to intercept the Nomu like he had just done with Bakugou, but due to his body had already pushed the limit of one for all and the damage he had already taken, he could not make it in time to rescue Alexander. At speed faster than what the Midoriya and the others could see, the Nomu raised its fist to pummel down Alexander. Alexander stood waiting for Nomu to get closer. When it did, Alexander gave a quick grin and suddenly he jumped away fast in high speed. All Might, who was about halfway, stopped up abruptly when he realized that Alexander was not there anymore, and Nomu's fist hammered down on the ground, making pretty big mark, but missing Alexander. For the others, both the students and the villains, when they saw Nomu's attack was finished, they became confused as All Might and Nomu. What the? Where is Kawalksik? Kirishima asked, dumbfounded. Up here, Birdbrain, Alexander's voice said, and everyone looked to see that Alexander was effortlessly balancing on top of a lamppost with his hands in his pocket on his trench coat. How did he get up there? Todoroki asked, baffled like the others. Alexander looked down the monster. I have heard one or two things about you. You're supposed to have more than one quirk, right? Nomu didn't answer because it couldn't. Alexander then jumped down from on top the lamppost and drew his sword from his back. Well then, just so you know, that isn't going to stop me for going one-on-one against you. All Might yelled in protest. Young Kawalksik, stay away from him. Get to safety. Yeah, no. Alexander protested. He had a plan, and the opportunity was too good for him to pass up. I am going to fight this thing. What? You can't be serious. Step aside, All Might yelled. Alexander was risking his life too greatly. And you can fight with that wound you have? Give me some time with Birdbrain here and gather your strength a bit. You get another turn if you want, don't you worry. Alexander casually told the symbol of peace. Alex, this thing is extremely strong. Let All Might fight it, Midoriya yelled in worry for his new friend. But Midoriya also knew that All Might had stressed his quirk already too much today, and it could go out at any moment. Alexander quickly thought through how he was going to do this. In contrary to what he said before, Alexander was watching them for a bit from the sideline and overheard some talk about Nomu having shock absorption, and he saw it regenerate itself after breaking out of Todoroki's ice. Not to mention it had super speed and strength. In a head-to-head fight, Alexander himself would probably be able to survive Nomu's strength thanks to his own regeneration. However, he wasn't invincible and could die if his regeneration was pushed too far for too long. Plus, he didn't feel like getting mauled today, so he was going to play it safe by dodging as much as he could. The Nomu could probably also die if it was hit too many times in a row, so the regeneration couldn't keep up and tire out. The real problem was that shock absorption. However, he quickly came up with an idea. Thanks to his father's demonic BLD, he had the ability to use demonic magic. His strength alone would probably not be able to really hurt the creature through brute force alone. But a combination of his supernatural strength, his sword uprising and charged magic should make a deadly move. In other words, he was going to pierce Nomu with demon magic-powered sword stab. However, he needed time for gathering enough demonic magic to charge the sword. Good thing he had already decided on dodging as much as possible and began to charge uprising immediately. That kid is going to fight Nomu. Oh, ho ho, he had no idea what he is in for, Shigaraki thought. Whoever this was going to be turned into grind meat. Nomu attack him and pulverize him. The Nomu charged again, striking at Alexander. The punch sent out a wave of wind that All Might, Midoriya and the others had to block for. But Alexander had dodged again, and he came up on Namu's right side and placed his left hand on it to lean. "You think you got him?" Alexander taunted the bird thing with a smile. Nomu turned slightly and punched out at him again, but Alexander simply dodged again. For the next few minutes Alexander just kept on evading Namu's attacks and doing the occasional taunt, while still charging his sword with magic. Nobody seemed to have noticed that it was slowly gaining a red glow around the edges. Meanwhile, on top the staircase, Kikuchi, Hagakure, Asui and Mainta had gotten up the stairs thanks to Uraraka, Shiro, Kato and Shoji was carrying the unconscious Aizawa. "He is still breathing, right Shoji?" Uraraka asked. "Yes, from what I can tell he is still alive," Shoji said, and the rest breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank God, I would felt bad if we lost our homeroom teacher this early in the semester," Kikuchi said. 13 spoke up weakly. "How is the fight going below?" Shiro looked down to where the battle was taking place. However, he became rather shocked. "Ah!" The startled scream alerted the others. "Shiro, what's wrong, man? Don't mean All Might is losing?" Sato asked, very worried. "No, he isn't. All Might is not fighting the brain guy. Alexander is," Shiro said, shocking the other students. "Say what?" They all screamed in unison and walked over to the edge and looked down. Below, they could see that Alexander was dodging the attacks of the huge creature, while All Might and the rest idly watched along with the villains. "Why is he fighting that thing alone?" Hagakure yelled. "I know Alexander is strong, but that thing is monstrous," Sato said. "Why do I have to be in a class with this insane maniac?" Mainta shouted. Back down below again. All Might and the rest stood still, wondering what to do. Right now, Alexander was currently engaged with Nomu, and he himself could technically go against the other two. But there was the risk of Nomu simply intercepting him, and if All Might went after the Nomu, the other two would just come and attack Midoriya and the others. In fact, Alexander may just have endangered them further by engaging the Nomu. He did not know how much longer he could keep up his stronger form. The students next to All Might were impressed by their classmate, who was evading the attacks of a monster they could barely see move themselves. They had also never really seen the full extent of Alexander's powers, and now was very good chance to do so. Meanwhile, a few meters away, Shigaraki was getting rather irritated. Whoever this was, he was infuriatingly fast for a student. Nomu was supposed to be a creature that could deal with All Might, yet Nomu hadn't laid a finger on him. He just wanted the student dead. "Now, Augur, Nomu, kill him." Nomu tried to unleash more flurries of attacks, but none hit the sword-wielding teen. Meanwhile, Alexander could feel that he had filled his sword with all his magic, and grinned. Alexander jumped a little further away after the next punch Nomu made to gain some distance. Alexander then did something All Might did not expect and got into a defensive pose, by spread legs apart to have a good foothold, putting up his left arm to block attacks and his right arm that was holding behind his person. Don't tell me he is going to take its attacks, All Might feared. But before he knew it, Nomu closed the distance. Nomu was about to throw a super heavy punch at Alexander. However, that was exactly what Alexander was hoping for. Time slowed for Alexander as he saw the punch from Nomu. Right at that moment, Alexander moved his sword forward right into the right shoulder of the Nomu. The magic-powered sword was unleashed, making the move powerful. The blade pierced the Nomu's skin, flesh, and sliced straight through, and the right arm of Nomu flew off from the force. The students on top the stairs, the ones on the ground, All Might, and the villains all wide-eyed from astonishment and shock. The arm flew through the air and landed a few meters away from Shigaraki. The Nomu let out a huge roar in pain as it also staggered back several steps. Rarg! Nomu held up its other arm to hold the bloody empty socket where the right arm used to be. What the? Shigaraki raged in pure shock. He was harmed by a kid, Kurogiri said in a loud, surprised tone. Nomu the All Might killer was damaged through physical strength. The monster. Alexander slashed its arm clean off, Kirishima screamed. Surreal. Todoroki said in amazement. His ice had made it cut off its flesh, but now the monster was roaring in pain. DMN him, bakugou muttered in his breath furiously. Midoriya stood gazing at what had occurred. He had never seen Alexander in combat, only slight mention of him competing against Kikuchi with an outstanding time record. Was this his real power? If so, it was the type strength and fearlessness he wanted to reach to. He is far better than I thought he was, All Might thought with a hint of awe. Never had he seen a hero this young fight like pro. However, still it was not over yet. Meanwhile, Alexander breathed heavily in and out 2 times. Though he managed to hurt the thing, but he also knew it had regeneration, and he himself had just used all his magic in order to pull that stunt off, and regenerating magic usually took some time for him. That meant that Nomu would probably regrow and go after him again, and he would not have the magic to hurt him like that, at least for a while. Oh boy, this was going to take a while. The villain Shigaraki gazed more angrily than before at the sword-wielding teen and yelled out to his monster. Nomu, grow back your lost limb and go after him again. Nomu did as it was commanded and started to regenerate, but suddenly and unexpectedly it let out another huge roar in pain, and many covered their ears to not get deafened by its screeching roar. Regeneration. What? Nomu, what's going on? Shigaraki slightly panicked. Everyone else were also dumbfounded, even Alexander. However, he then felt something coming from the monster's empty socket. It was small trances from his own magic attack. Very small traces had sat themselves inside Nomu's flesh. Was his magic hindering the quirk? He didn't even think it was possible for demonic power to do that. Either way he looked at it, it was an unexpected surprise, and a good one at that. Alexander then formed a grin on his face. Oh, did I break your pet? He taunted Shigaraki. DMN it, Shigaraki said furiously, scratching his neck strong for some reason. This is why hate I kids. Shigaraki, Kurogiri said. This was a bad time for his boss to get irritated. Despite his magic had not returned, Alexander was ready to give another go at Nomu. But then All Might walked up in front of him holding up an arm signaling him to stop. With his back turned to the transfer student, he then said, Young Kowalczyk, when a pro tells you to stay back, you stay back. Your method was too reckless and downright stupid if I have to be frank. The #1 hero said with disapproval. Alexander didn't appreciate that. However, All Might then changed his tone. But I thank you nonetheless. While I was watching, I came up with a way to defeat him. Midoriya and the others took note of that. All Might then turned around, throwing up 2 straight fingers to form a V and broad smile. Besides, I think it's my turn again, isn't it? Head back with the others. This is going to get wild. Alexander raised an eyebrow in confusion at first, but then placed his sword on his back like he was never even bothered by All Might's criticism to begin with. All right, just tag me in if it gets too rough again. Alexander joked and walked casually over to Midoriya and the others. Shigaraki stopped scratching his neck and looked at ahead. All his patience was lost at this point. In calmer manner, he told his ally Kurogiri, guess there is no other choice. Nomu still has 1 arm left. We are not going home empty-handed, not yet. Kurogiri slightly reluctantly asked, Are you sure? Yes, I am. Nomu, Shigaraki yelled at the creature and came over to his side. The pain which it felt was mostly gone, but its right arm had only made a small blob of flesh when regenerating. "VERYYYY and Nomu will go after All Might. I'll get those brats. Let's clear this level and go home," Shigaraki said. He had to win this little game now. All Might stood looking back at the villains and gave a little speech as he clenched his fist. "It's gonna be alright. Now sit back and watch a pro at work, future heroes." But inside his head he was very concerned. He probably had maybe a minute left before One for All goes out, even with the small break Alexander had provided. Even so, he had to stop these villains, because he was the world's symbol of peace and justice. Shigaraki charged at the kids. "Guess we have to fight after all," Kirishima said, and used his quirk to harden his arms. But just then All Might and Nomu charged at each other, and their collided punch sent out a huge wave of wind, sent Shigaraki back, and the students braced themselves by holding up their arms, except for Alexander, who only held up a hand to block the gusts. "Weren't you listening? Just because that one could slice at Nomu a little doesn't mean you be able to." "The shock absorption," Shigaraki said. "Yes, so what about it?" All Might yelled back and began brawling with Nomu, each strike intense to create waves of wind. They then both sped up their speed, letting out flurries of punches at one another. Despite it only having one arm, Nomu was putting up one heck of a fight. Midoriya, who was trying to be blown away from wind, he is going to fight that brain guy head on. "Wow, they are going really fast," Kirishima commented in a yell. "No, I can't get near them," Korajiri yelled, unable to help out Nomu. Nomu and All Might sped up even more. "I learned something when I watched young Kawalksik. Your power is absorption, not nullification. That means there is a limit to what you can take." Namu's blob of flesh had reached to a point where it could be used, and Nomu punched All Might's wound with it, catching him off guard. However, All Might clenched his teeth and continued on despite it. "So, you were made to take me on, big guy. If you can really stand me taking you on at a 100%, then I'll just have to go beyond and force you to surrender." All Might increased to as much power as he could. Midoriya looked at the epic battle. All Might's punches, they were calculated. They weren't random, and all of them were going past than what he had previously been throwing. The intensity of the battle increased as All Might fought Nomu. The Udge's dome was getting wrecked by their punches, kicks and throws. At some point they ended up in the air, where All Might caught Nomu and then spun him around to then slam him into the ground below, making ruble and large stones loose from the crashed Nomu. The students closest to the fight awed at the spectacle of might. All Might landed on the ground and summoned all the power left in his body. You may have heard these words before, but I'll teach you what they really mean. All Might ready a powerful punch, go beyond, plus ultraya. The punch hit Nomu and he flung like a ragdoll up to the ceiling and beyond that. The punch from All Might sent Nomu flying through the ceiling wall and high into the sky, disappearing from sight. All Might's punch sent out such a force it created a miniature earthquake that everyone at the facility felt. All Might had done it. He beat Nomu. All Might stood surrounded by smoke. Man, he must have been desperate. Back in my heyday, one punch would have been enough. But this time it could more than 300 mighty punches, All Might smilingly proclaimed. Not unbelievable. Alexander lost count around 170. Still, though, the power deserved quite applause. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the Usti. Get your hands up. In the mountain zone of the Usti facility, Kaminari had just used his quirk to incapacitate the villains in that area and left himself dazed and dumber from his own attack. However, one of the villains were unaffected since he had the type of quirk as Kaminari, electricity, and then capture Kaminari. Mom, Yayurazu, and Gyro had surrendered since the villain had threatened to end Kaminari's life. And no quirks, got it? Use your powers and I'll kill your friend here, the villain demanded. Kaminari is helpless, Yayurazu said. DMN villain. Gyro cursed. He totally caught us with our breathe down. I thought that electric blast would free the all. We are so stupid. How did we not see this coming? The villain talked. I feel a little brotherhood with the other electric types, Suo. I don't to kill him, but I will if you make me, he said, and sparks started appearing on his free hand. An electric type? He probably the one Todoroki said was jamming our communications, Yayurazu deduced. The villain started to move. Don't move a muscle, let's take this nice and slow, he said. That had to do something. Gyro quickly came up with an idea. You know you electric types are so lucky. People with electric type quirks are destined for mainstream success. The villain stopped, confused to listen. Huh. What is she doing? Yaoyorozu thought. Gyro continued. Even if you didn't want to be a hero, there are plenty of jobs in the city, right? Your kind of quirk is in high demand. Yaoyorozu then noticed something. Gyro's plug-in ear wire was trying to reach down and go to her boots in order for her to use the speakers in the boots to attack. So I am wondering, would you become a villain in the first place? You don't have to answer. I just thought it might be interesting to know. Just then the villain moved his and with charged lighting up to Kaminari's face, which made Gyro and Yaoyorozu flinch. Nice try. He saw through her plan. Think you can distract me that easily? Big mistake, sweetheart. I am not some thug who can be outsmarted by a couple of kids. Gyro retracted her plug-in wire and the knocked out villains were beginning to wake up. You need to take hostage situations seriously. So here is the new deal. Either this idiot is going to die, or you are. You either save his life or your own. The villain proposed. Things were not looking good. Now, what's it gonna be, girlies? Back at the center of Uste. The villain leader Shigaraki was scratching his neck again after Nomu's defeat. He could not believe it. All Might, he was just as strong as he had always been. Had he been lied to? What's wrong? All Might caught his attention. Not attacking me. Didn't you say you were going to clear this level earlier? Well, come and get me. If you dare. Shigaraki panicked slightly. With the students nearby, they were watching the banter between All Might and the villains. This is intense, Bakugou commented. As I suspected, there is no reason for us to fight now. All Might will handle it. Todoroki said. We should regroup with the other guys. The last thing we want to do is getting taken hostage or get in his way. Kirishima said and turned around to walk away. Alexander, however, did not agree. Something was slightly off. If All Might would handle them, he would have done so already. So why hadn't he? Was he too injured? Alexander took his sword and held it up in a manner that signaled a stop of the students. They looked at his confused. I don't think this is the end yet. Let's retreat, yes, but slowly, backwards, and do not take your eyes off them. The situation can change in an instant if we are not ready. Meanwhile, Midoriya was also looking at the situation, but his worries were higher. He knew All Might was bluffing. He knew that by now All Might would have used up his power and was severely weakened at this point. The villains could get to him, and he would not be able to defend himself. In All Might's he knew there was no way he could fight anymore. The Nomu took a lot out him. He was pretty sure if he made another move of any kind he would go back to his weaker form that resembled a guy who had not eaten anything in months. He would just have to stall until the rest of the pro-hero teachers got here. What? You scared? He taunted the villain. He could read it on them, they were hesitating. Maybe it could work. Shigaraki began starching himself yet again, this time even more furiously. It was a wonder he wasn't bleeding at this point. If only Nomu was here, he would rush you right now. P&D you into the ground with giving it a second thought. Kurogiri, the purple mist guy, leaned over to Shigaraki. Tomiwa Shigaraki, please do not fret. Look at him. He has defiantly weakened. Nomu's attacks were successful. He is on his own. The children appear to be frozen in fear. And look, our underlings are recovering. The villains around started to wake up. We likely have a few minutes before their reinforcements show up. If you and I work together, we can do this. We haven't missed our chance to kill All Might. Shigaraki abruptly stopped starching himself again and calmed down once he saw the still had a chance. Yeah, you are right, this is it. We have no choice. We have to do it now. I mean, the big end boss is right here. The previously unconscious villains started to converge on the Alexander, Midoriya, and the three others. If think All Might can handle those guys, let's make sure these dudes don't hurt anyone else, Kirishima energetically said. Alexander saw the villains and flipped his sword up in the air quick to then catch it again and point at the villains. Grunts, THFF, is this even a fight? Shigaraki then charged towards All Might to kill him. Consider this revenge for what you did to Nomu, he yelled. Shigaraki got ready to use his quirk decay to kill All Might. OSHT, this was bad. Where is everyone? I need backup now, All Might frantically thought. Just then Midoriya, without thinking, jumped towards them aiming for Shigaraki. Alexander felt a wind blast by and looked back to see Midoriya had gone head first over to All Might and the leader villains. What was Midoriya thinking? In Midoriya's head, he was the only one who knew how much trouble All Might was in. 3 of the other students noticed he had moved too. "Wow, Midoriya," Kirishima yelled. Midoriya flinched midair in pain. One for All had broken his legs again, even though he unintentionally controlled it earlier. It was okay, as long as he could hit the smoke guy, now that he knew his weakness. Midoriya channeled One for All in his fist. "Don't you touch All Might, you stupid villains," he screamed at them. However, Shigaraki quickly reached his arm, though Kirigiri's smoke that created a portal that intercepted Midoriya's course, he was going fly directly into Shigaraki's grip and be victim to his decay quirk. In the few seconds he had Alexander tried to reach for one of his guns, but had completely forgotten he left those at home. With no other option, he decided to run and assist Midoriya with his sword, but he wouldn't make it there in time. But then, out of nowhere, Shigaraki's hand was suddenly shot, and he had to pull back out of the portal and Midoriya dropped to the ground. What? Who is shooting? Alexander thought. If he didn't know better, he would have to say those shots come from a devil hunter. "They are here," All Might yelled in relief. Suddenly more shots were fired off and landed in various places and incapacitated villains, like in the mountain zone where Yoyoru, Gyro and Kaminari were held hostage. "Sorry everyone," a voice said from atop the staircase. "I know we are a bit late, but I got the teachers over here as fast as I could." It was the little animal with the high intelligence quirk, Nezu, the principal of U, and he had brought what seemed like an army. Teachers like Midnight, Snipe, Present Mike, and a bunch of others. Then class representative Ida stepped forth. "Your class rep has returned. I fulfilled my duty, and I brought reinforcements." The villain grunt refused to back down and started attacking the teachers. Present Mike used his quirk to scream at the villains in an extremely loud frequency and immobilized some. "Ah man, the pros are here. The game is over for real," Shigaraki reluctantly summarized, holding his shot hand. "Let's go home a try." He was suddenly shot again by Snipe through his shoulders and legs, forgetting a non-lethal takedown of course. But Kirigiri's smoke enveloped him in an effort to protect him. Snipe tried to shoot at the smoke guy, who was trying to get himself and Shigaraki away from the area. "DMN, we need to do something about that guy," he said. And that was when he heard a voice that said, "I am on it." Down below, Kirigiri was ready to transport himself and Shigaraki back to their hideout, but suddenly there was a huge pull that was SCK the air. He looked over to see 13 was standing using the black hole 13 had. Kirigiri fought back and started to teleport out of the facility. Shigaraki took one last at All Might and said, "I may have failed this time, but your days are numbered. All Might, symbol of peace, I am going to kill you," he yelled before he and Kirigiri vanished into thin air. After the villain leaders, a teacher started looking all over for the students. Luckily, not a single one of them had died. That day, the student learned what it meant to face evil, and somehow they survived. "So the bad guy got away, huh?" Alexander muttered to himself. Honestly, have them killed would be a hell of a lot easier. But it was not his style to kill humans, and pro heroes also didn't kill, so he guessed it was fine in the end. They could always hunt these guys later. Meanwhile, Midoriya was on the ground, looking down, blaming himself for not being helpful and worsening the situation. "I couldn't do it. I wasn't able to help you," he said to All Might. "That is absolutely not true," All Might said back, causing Midoriya to look up. In the steam that came from All Might's overclocked quirk use, he saw that he was reverting to his weaker form. All Might smiled at Midoriya. "You and your classmates bought me a few vital seconds. If not for you guys, all dead now. You hear? That means you too, young Midoriya. You saved me once again, kid." The sadness Midoriya was feeling quickly swept away by those words and started to cry with a smile. "Thank you, All Might." Just a few meters away was Todoroki, Bakugou and Kirishima watching the aftermath. With all the teachers here, that means the rest of the school is secure. The villains attacked this facility but not the rest of the campus, Todoroki deduced. Kirishima decided to check on his classmate who was on the ground. "Midoriya, hey," he shouted to him and began running over to him. Midoriya responded, "Sorry, I can't get up." "What, are you okay?" Kirishima asked while running. All Might was glad over the fact that class was looking out for each other. Wait, hang on. OCRP, if Kirishima comes any further he was going to find out his secret. SHT, 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 SHT. Midoriya suddenly panicked once he also realized that All Might's secret was going to be revealed if he didn't do anything. He quickly threw up a hand to signal Kirishima to stop. "Kirishima, wait!" he shouted. Kirishima looked confused for sec, but then a wall formed up from the ground blocking his way. He looked to see that it was one of the school members' cementos, a rock block-looking hero with the power to manipulate cement. "For your safety please stay back, young man. Join your classmates at the gate. Leave the injured to us, we can take of them," he explained. Kirishima thought little on since now he knew his classmate was in good hands. "Oh okay, Garach, I'm on it." He energetically said so and was about to go to the gate. Then he saw Alexander come walking up. "Yo Kirishima, Midoriya still breathing?" he asked. "Oh yeah, don't worry about that. The hero here said they will be taken care of," Kirishima responded. Alexander thought it was a little odd that they blocked off Kirishima like that. Might as well be sure," he said, and they yelled to Midoriya on the other side. "Hey, Midoriya, you all right behind there?" Midoriya quickly and unprepared responded. "Oh yeah, I am fine. Well, except for my legs, they are pretty burnt." "Well, at least you are alive. By the way, I feel like I have to say it, but next time don't charge in like that. Don't want to lose my neighbor this early in the semester." And I know. Alexander was really biting his pride right at that point. Midoriya could hear it and Kirishima could see it. Both didn't expect him to do something like that. I am probably the last person to say that, and also, sorry for not listening to your commands, All Might. All Might responded, with a deeper voice not to sound out of place, to the young man from Russia. "It's okay, Cowlsick, but you'll probably get an earful later too." Alexander disliked the fact he was apologizing for helping All Might, but he could get kicked out of you if he didn't try to at least stay on course. His assignment took priority over his feelings. He let out a big sigh to get the last few bits of broken pride out of his body. "Alkazadi. All right, Kirishima, let's back to the others." "Right." Kirishima and Alexander walked away from the wall and over to Bakugou and Todoroki. "Hey," he said, "for all of us to head for the entrance," Kirishima yelled to them. Meanwhile, somewhere completely else. Inside of an empty low-lit bar with a torn All Might poster, the purple smoke mist of Kurogiri emerged, and out came himself and Shigaraki, who was shot in multiple places. Awuo shot in both arms and legs. Even Nomu was beaten. "We failed. Those kids were so strong," Shigaraki grunted in pain. "He wasn't weakened at all. You were wrong, MSTR. So wrong." Kurogiri suddenly wore a suit somehow. The TV screen in the bar turned on, and a voice came through. "No, I wasn't. We just weren't as prepared as we should have been." Another voice then said through the TV, "I agree. We underestimated them. Thankfully we used that cheap League of Villains name and not our own. What about the creature the MSTR and I created? Where is Nomu?" The first voice. "Yes, where is Nomu?" Kurogiri answered. "He was blown away by All Might." "What?" the second voice asked. "Without the precise location, I couldn't use my quirk to get him back with us. We didn't have any time to search for him," Kurogiri said. "Travesty," the second voice said. "And after all the time we used make him more powerful than All Might." "I can't be helped." The first voice. "Unfortunately." "Power," Shigaraki whispered. "That reminds, there were two kids there who both tried to help him. They were fast. One even cut off Namu's arm." "Excuse me?" the second said. "Oh?" the first said. "A kid with black hair and red eyes used a sword and cut off Namu's arm, and the other, a green hair, used moves similar to All Might. And he got in the way of us killing All Might," Shigaraki said. "If they hadn't gotten in the way, we would have destroyed the symbol of peace." "Back up a bit. You are telling us that a student managed to damage Nomu? Impossible. All Might should at least be the only one to even hurt him," the second said. "Naturally, this is very upsetting. But this was not a futile mission. We have learned many things. Gather the villainous elite. Take all the time you need. I must remain hidden in the shadows, which is why I need you to be my face. A symbol of your own. Tamura Shigaraki. Next time you will show the world why it should be afraid of you. Kurogiri? The first voice said. Yes, the mist villain said. Would you kindly transfer the recording I told you to film for our special associate? The first asked. Of course. I'll send it right after. Kurogiri complied. Mr. Shigaraki started talking again. Just who is this associate you keep speaking of? Ah, yes. Don't worry for now about the associate. I promise to tell when I have worked with her some more. The first explained. Her? Shigaraki asked curiously. HM? Oh, I guess I slipped the tongue a little. Anyway, I am about to contact her now. Till next time, the first said and cut of communication. Meanwhile, somewhere unknown. The voice from the vid feed was a person simply named All for One. The only thing that could really be said was that he was not on the best of terms with the number one hero. After a climatic battle between him and All Might had left him scared, and he was put up to several different kinds of machines at the moment. Please call to line 6. All for One said to a henchman. Somewhere inside of a motel in the outskirts of Tokyo. A young woman in her late teens sat in a dark room with light coming through the curtain opening. She sat in a chair wearing long combat boots, dark blue leggings, an elegant azure blue jacket with silver trim that folded out and looked like a type of skirt at the waist. Her hair black as onyx and tied into a long ponytail. Her eyes azure blue as her jacket. To her side was a Chinese-style sword. She was the person who had eliminated the demons at the temple days before. She sat patiently waiting for her contact. Suddenly, the TV in the room turned on, and All for One talked through it. Hello, again. I hope you the long wait haven't bothered you. All for One, the young woman said. So how did your little attack on All Might go? She asked in a cold, emotionless tone. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. All for One said. There were complications. Nomu was defeated. You told me quite a lot of things about your created pet, and now it's gone. The girl said. So, to business. Have you found another lead? I have. But since this is a deal, I would like for you to agree to help me on something in the future. All for One said. The young woman was quiet for a moment. Very well, your info has been useful so far. I will honor our agreement for now. Excellent to hear. I will send you the data I have now and give you the rest at a later date. All for One said. You play a dangerous game with me, but given your history, I can assume that you are not the type to go back on your word. The young woman said. To be honest, there may once have been a time I would have tried to double-cross you, but these days I find betrayal more trivial than anything. All for One said. Also, would you like to see the recording that my young Portage has gotten? It might give you an idea on All Might if you ever come face to face with him. The young woman pondered for a moment. Very well, let's see what this so-called symbol of peace is all about. I knew it would awaken interest in you. Here you go. The screen on the TV then showed of the attack on the Asti facility. Who are these people? She asked. Those are the students of Ua High. All Might had recently announced that he was going to train the next generation of heroes. If you watch some more, you will see some of the student that gave Shigaraki a strong time. All for One said. The video played, and the young woman saw the one called All Might show up to rescue the students of Ua. However, the video then showed a young man wielding a sword. Suddenly, the young woman ordered in a raised voice. Hold it there, stop. All for One's voice came back as the screen paused. Is something wrong? The young woman gazed at the TV displaying the sword-wielding student. The young woman got up from her chair, mouth open from shock, and walked slowly over to the TV screen, breathing irregularly. She gently and slightly hesitantly placed her fingertips on the plasma screen and over the image of the young man. Red eyes. Black hair. That look. And most importantly, the amulet he wore around his neck. Was it really him? Could really be? After all this time? The young woman was quiet for seemed like an eternity, but in reality, only around 2 minutes had passed of complete and utter silence. The young woman then spoke to All for One again. All for One? Yes, what is wrong? All for One said, confused but also very calm. The young woman paused again, but then told the villain. That student with the blade is the second child of Kain. Interesting. Minutes later back at the UST facility. 18, 19, 20, 21. Everyone seems to be unharmed, except that boy whose legs are all messed up. A police officer named Tsukachi. He wore a long light brown trench coat along with a hat also colored light brown. However, he was nowhere near as stylish as Alexander. All the students except Midoriya had been taken outside the UST facility to make sure everyone was accounted for. The one with the tail quirk, Ojiro, suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder. It was the invisible girl Hagakure. Ojiro, I heard you were a really good fighter. I had no idea you were so strong, she said in an impressed tone. Well, I wasn't all alone, Ojiro said. I was thrown in along with Alexander, after we somehow managed to beat the villains around us. After that we split up, and was looking for a back door while Alexander went out the front. I didn't find one though. He honestly confessed. Speaking of which, Hagakure said enthusiastically and pointed with her glove at Alexander. Alexander here actually went and fought the bird monster. Those who had not seen Alexander fighting the Nomu were shocked to hear of this information. Uda stammered. WHDA ... what? Alexander, you engaged in combat with the monster villain. Hold on, Gyro said. That big bird-looking thing that there was colored black with exposed brain. Alexander, confidently as usual, smiled and told her with honesty. I only damaged that thing a bit before All Might decided that he wanted another go at it. A little basking in glory never hurt. Kirishima jumped and told the class with much energy in his spirit. Man, you guys should have been there. Alexander took his sword and just kept on dodging all of its attacks, until he finally swung at it, cutting its right arm off. The class members who were not present when Alexander did the feat dropped their jaws stunned. Wow, that sounds incredibly brutal and cool at the same time, Kaminari said, a little intimidated of Alexander's battle prowess again. Kirishima turned to Alexander and asked, You must have some serious strength to cut the Nomu, since All Might never did anything like that when he finally defeated it, because it had that shock absorption ability too. Some slightly flinched when they heard that. Alexander then correctly informed Kirishima, Oh no, my friend, strength was only one part of attacking that thing. Kirishima was confused. Huh, what do you mean? He asked. Alexander then pulled his sword from his back and held it in front of himself, and then pointed at it. This thing is sharp. The black-cloaked student with the bird head Tokoyami quickly gathered what he meant. I see. The shock absorption was meant to counter punches, and since the sword was pointy, it pierced through and made the ability useless when you also added your own strength. About the gist of it, Alexander said, not telling about his magical abilities too, and placed the sword on his back again. He is so terrifying, some of the other students thought. The police detective returned with some other officers. Let's go and get these students back to the main campus. They have been through a lot, and we don't need to question them any right away. Sue the Frog Girl jumped closer to the police detective. Detective, what about Mr. Aizawa? The detective quickly called up the hospital to get an accurate information on his status. The bones in his arms are splintered, and he's got facial fracking. Fortunately, there does not seem to be any serious brain damage. But his orbital floor has almost been completely destroyed. We have no idea if his eyesight will be impaired once he is healed up. Detective Tsukachi turned to the students. Well, you heard the man, he said. Naturally, the students were worried about Mr. Aizawa. But the pink-colored acid girl Ahisto also came up to ask, Sir, what about 13? Detective Tsukachi reassured her. There is no need to worry there. To spit some pretty bad lacerations to the back, 13 is going to pull through, good as new. The students were glad and relieved to hear not all news were bad. Tsukachi continued, and All Might is also without any serious injuries. He is in the nurse's office right now. Recovery Girl's power should be all the treatment he needs. What about Deku? Uraraka yelled slightly. How is Midoriya? Ida asked, also showing concern. Midori? Tsukachi suddenly remembered who that was. The student with a backfiring quirk. Ah, Recovery Girl is taking care of him too. He is fine. Oh, good. Kikuchi genuinely commented, and the other student agreed. Now let us get you back to class, Sakachi said, and he was responded with a big, okay, from the class as they then began moving. Before going further, Sakachi turned to one of his fellow policemen and to inform him, Sansa, I still have some business in the nurse's office. I leave this to you, okay? The officer he talked to was kind of wired since his head was that of a cat, with bell collar. A few of the students noticed and looked dumbfounded at before going on. Bakugou, who was standing in front of the UST facility processing what had occurred inside just minutes before. What really got him was how Midoriya, or whom he calls Deku, just charged in. It really got to him in some shape or form. Kirishima then came around and said, Hey, come on man, we are going back to class now. Yeah, I heard him, you idiot. Bakugou responded and went along. To sum up what happened quickly, the police found the Nomu in a wooden area nearby, but it made no effort to resist or fight, so the police arrested it and took it with them to the police station, and the principal of the school, Nezu the small animal with an intellect quirk, gave them full permission to search Yua top to bottom for any other things that could help them in their search for the villains. Later back at Yua, Kikuchi turned to Uraraka and Ida and asked, Hey, two wanna wait for Midoriya once he is done in the nurse's office? Actually, I was going to do that anyway, though it might get a bit late before they actually let him go, Ida said. I think I'll stay too. What about you, Alex? You want to stay too? Uraraka asked. Nah, I think he'll be fine, so I am just going to head home. Besides, I am his neighbor, so I'll probably see him there at some point later today or tomorrow, Alexander said. Meanwhile, at the nurse's office, Recovery Girl said and talked to the two banged-up people who was users of the quirk one for all, lying in beds. I guess I can't scold you for him being back here, since it was not your fault. I can't be sure yet, but I think I shortened my time limit again with that fight. All Might told them, I hope I can at least hold the form for an hour. I am so sorry, Midoriya said. All Might reassured him. Well, no use worrying, he said as he then sat up in bed. These things happen. Midoriya stared with a sour mood at the bandages that covered All Might's upper body. However, just then the door to the room opened, and in stepped the detective. Hello, All Might, it's been a while, he said. All Might sure was surprised to see him. What the hell? I didn't know you were investigating. Midoriya quickly sat up and said, Wow, All Might, it's okay he is seeing you like this. Oh yeah, it's fine. All Might calmed Midoriya. This guy is all right. Naomasa Tsukachi, best friend on the police force. He is legit, I trust him. That quite the introduction, Tsukachi said. Sorry to cut to the case, but we could really use any information that you might have. All Might quickly waved his hands. Hold on before all of that. Tell me, are all the students okay? And Aizawa, I mean Eraserhead and 13. With a cheerful expression, Tsukachi told them. Not counting this boy. The only student injuries were scrapes, and both of the teachers are in stable condition. Relax. Both All Might and Midoriya sighed in relief. It's good to hear. If you heroes hadn't risked your lives, the students never would have made it. You three saved that entire class of kids today, Tsukachi said. You are not seeing the whole picture today. The students also risked their lives. They fought as strong as us. All Might said, and Midoriya's spirit got a little uplifted. I don't there ever have been a group of first years who has experienced a real so early in their training. If only he knew, and not only survived. They learned what it means to be a pro. Those villains made a mistake attacking them. This class is strong. They are filled with courage and drive. He turned to Midoriya. So Kawalksik is really your neighbor? Alexander? Yeah, he is. We live on the same floor in the same apartment building, Midoriya replied. DMN. That young man sure know how to fight, All Might said. Yeah, he sure is. I can't but think of the kind of training he has done to be so good. I sure would like to be as confidant as people like you and him, or at least show it on the outside, Midoriya said. You'll get there some point eventually. If anything, he may just be the perfect sparring partner for the whole class. If he gets rid of that not following orders mentality when the times are desperate, All Might said. But I do think that everyone in your class are going to become great heroes. He then gave a thumbs up. Midoriya was lifted a bit more again, and he also formed a smile on his face. Later back at the apartment building. As the sun was setting, Alexander opened the door into his home and sat down on his couch and took off his coat and examined it. There were holes in it after he had fallen and priced by several metal pipes in the fire zone debris. Luckily, none of his classmates had noticed, so no real fuss, and he had learned how to prepare for these things and also knew how to sew. But there would probably still be some BLD in the fire zone he had left behind. He wasn't too worried though. He could always have a DARTA member go in and get rid of the evidence. Just then his phone then went off with a message sound. He took it out of his pocket. The message was from Michelangelo, Miss Calhoun's code name. It read, "Michelangelo, I have an assignment for you. Get your gear and be ready outside in 5. Alexander grinned devilishly and went to his bedroom. The bedroom was nothing fancy, and he crouched to reach under the bed where there was a plank made of wood that he removed to show a locked case. Alexander pulled out a key he had on him and unlocked it. Inside was the deadly weapons he had gotten from DARTA. He reached in and grabbed his 2 favorite firearms, Downpour and Heatwave, his 2 golden dual pistols. Each had a tiny little symbol and the handle. Downpour had a cloud that was raining, and Heatwave had a sun that was shining brightly. Alexander then walked over to his closest and took out another trench coat. However, this one was pure black instead of his normal one that was gray and red. He took it on and placed the pistols inside of it and walked out of the apartment. Time to hunt. Midoriya was released from recovery girls' care and he was sent home, but it was rather, and the moon had come out, so he didn't believe he would see any of his classmates since they would probably be home already. But when he came outside to the entrenched door, he saw that Uraraka, Kikuchi, and Ida were standing there. "Deku," Uraraka said when she noticed him, and both Ida and Kikuchi also noticed him thereafter. "Wow, that sure took its time," Kikuchi commented. "It most certainly did," Ida agreed. Of course, Midoriya was glad to see them, but also a bit confused. "Guys, you were waiting for me?" "Well, yeah, we wanted to make sure you got home today," Kikuchi explained. "We also so invited Alex, but he decided he wanted to go home instead, thinking you probably would be fine." "Oh, I see," Midoriya said, and the 4 then went to the train station together to get to their own respective homes. Hours later, in another part of the city, Alexander was standing on top of a rooftop overlooking a particular street not too far from the famous Tatooine station. He was his black trench coat, and his had also take with him his golden dual pistols. He had left his sword at U, because he wasn't allowed to for some wired reason by the teachers. He remembered back on the briefing for the mission. Alexander sat in the back of a polished silver-colored car, and in the driver's seat sat Miss Calhoun giving him the details. "So for the past month, people around the area have gone missing, and the authorities haven't been able to find anything. But when we sent in an agent to get more info, he got photos of demonic writing on one of the walls inside one of the bars. So, we believe it is an elusive one that hides in among the many working people," Miss Calhoun said. "Makes sense. Either it feeds on life energy or more commonly devours people. This would be the ideal place to hide," Alexander said. "We highly believe that the demon may come out at least 2 hours after midnight, but we are not certain. So unfortunately for you, you are going to be on lookout for quite some time," Miss Calhoun said, slightly joking. "Hee hee, not my first time. I'll wait around until my amulet picks up anything," Alexander said and was about to leave the car. Miss Calhoun stopped him for a moment. "Hold on, take this." She handed him a black bandana. "Am I a robber now?" Alexander jokingly asked. "Just in case you get spotted, Class 1A is all over the news. Got to keep a low profile," Miss Calhoun said. "Man, first the Uschas attacked and now this. This might be the best day in weeks. By the way, might want to get someone to go in and clean up some BLD I felt behind in the fire zone, near the back. Lord knows what would happen if they do a BLD test on it," Alexander said and grabbed the cloth. "I'll get someone on it," Miss Calhoun said and then drove off down the street. Back to now, Alexander stood staring down on the BRTHL the demon was supposed to be in from a rooftop. It was quiet, and the clock was already past midnight. Just then the door opened down at the BRTHL and a appealing woman with long blonde hair stepped out, and around the corner came two men with animal quirks. One was that of a warthog and the other a rhino. Alexander's amulet began to glow green instantly. "There you are," he muttered to himself and took the bandana from his pocket in the trench coat and wrapped it around his mouth. Down on the street, the appealing young woman was lightly clothed and wore a white jacket. The street was empty, and one of the lampposts flickered between on and off. She was then approached by two men from behind. Hey there, what do we have here?" the one with the warthog head said. "A lonely lady walking these streets alone. Haven't you heard it has been dangerous here lately?" the rhino one said. They were trying to hit on her. "Oh no, I am fine. I don't mind it at all," she said, blushing, her voice soft as the wind. They walked into one of the alleys. "What do you say to me and my friend here help you get home safe and sound?" the warthog man said. "Maybe you can invite us in so can get to know each other better," the rhino man said. "Why, don't know, I mean we just met and I don't know your names yet. But sure, you two fine men are welcome," the woman said all seductively. The two animal men grinned. They had just scored, and so easily, they thought. "Yo," the three then heard a voice say. They looked behind them and saw this guy, who was Alexander dressed in black, and with that bandana wrapped around mid-face so it covered his nose and mouth. "Huh? What do you want?" the warthog man asked. Alexander didn't say anything and walked closer to them, stopping about 7 meters away. "Nice place you found here? I got to this city myself some time ago." He paused. "You seem to have found a nice meal there." He started talking casually. The two men stepped away from the woman stand up towards Alexander. "Hey, step away, buddy. We found her first and we won't let you cause trouble with us," the rhino man said. Alexander continued. "You should know that you are not that great of hiding. Writing on a wall for extra and enchantment? I mean, I have met a lot of others who also settle like you. But that is the thing, isn't it? You want more and more, and you want every ounce you can your hands on." The two men looked at each other baffled. "What the heck is on about?" the warthog man said. "Was this guy dropped as a child? He does not seem right," the rhino man said. This was getting stranger by the second. All they wanted to do is follow that lady home. Alexander continued again. "You are an idiot to think you would get away with this. The moment you decided to pry on the people here, it was only a matter of time before someone like me came along to put a solid stop on you." This was so wired for the two men. It was like he wasn't listening to them. "Well, now that I am here, might as well get started," Alexander said. Alexander then quickly pulled out his dual pistols and fired off 2 shots that went straight past the two men and hit the woman they were hitting on. One gunshot in the middle off her chest, the other in the head. The two men panicked. "That guy just killed her in cold blood," the rhino man screamed. "Holy SHT, he's got a gun, he's got a gun." The warthog man tried his best to defuse the situation, even though he was freaked out himself. "Dude, shut up. Listen, we don't have money, all right? Let us go, please. I swear we won't breathe a word." Alexander's attitude turned serious. "You two shut up and get out of here. She is about to stand back up," he warned them. The two men was confused and frightened. However, they then heard an animalistic growl coming from behind them. They turned around to see what was making that noise. To their shock, they then saw the woman was rising slowly in a very scary manner into a bend-over pose, and her skin turned gray in the blink of an eye. She then stood up straight and both wounds suddenly closed, and she opened her eyes to show they had turned completely red, and she had this angry expression on her face. "Why you?" she raged with a distorted voice. The next thing that happened terrified the two men. The woman began to deform and grow larger and thinner. Her arms and legs became freakishly long and spiked around the edges, and her hands became claws. Her shoulder expanded outwards to weigh an abnormal degree. Her upper back along with the neck became huge, so much it was nearly the same size as normal door. Her face became uglier as it soon showed multiple of rows of sharp teeth in her mouth, and her ears became longer and pointy. The last was that what could be called a tentacle grew out of her back. The tentacle was long, wiggly, and spiked with thorns of some kind. Alexander stared seriously at the demonic transformation that was occurring while the two men were completely frozen in fear. After the demon had transformed, it talked again in a distorted voice. I was about to take these two with me so I could feast on them, but you had to come along and make things complicated. Well, guess what? I'll simply feed on you too. I am FANFICTIONnet, your doom-pathic humans. The demon then tried to strike at the two men who were still frozen in fear. Alexander gritted his teeth and jumped forward and grabbed their wrists and then jumped backwards to save them. The demon's attack missed, and Alexander let go of the two men, and they in turn ran around the corner in an effort to get to safety. Let's get this over with. Alexander and aimed his pistols. The demon charged at Alexander and attacked with the tentacle. He in turn dodged the attack and began shooting. The fight then went back onto the street and out of the alley. The two men were cowering behind a trash can. Why they just didn't run away was anyone's guess. Alexander tried to jump close to shoot the demon in the head. However, its sharp long arm forced him to gain distance again. He tried to then attack it from behind, but the demon was really good and really fast at turning itself around on the spot. The demon made another swing with its tentacle at Alexander, who dodged in time. However, the next swing he didn't manage to evade and was sent into a building wall. Alexander sighed as he got to his feet again and then began jumping. To gain enough momentum, a circle of red demonic glyphs quickly formed underneath his feet, and he then jumped on the circle and got to the rooftop on the building. The circle of glyphs disappeared as fast as it came. This was a technique he had been working for quite a while. Using demonic magic, Alexander could create a small platform and use it to get around with. He called it air hike. Running away, the demon taunted. Alexander didn't respond and started walking, seemingly casually walking along the edge of the building, while the demon tried swing its tentacle at him, to which he in turn dodged whenever it came for him. Alright, how do I do this? He thought to himself. Unlike earlier when he fought the Nomu, he used his sword that he imbued with magic, but he didn't have the sword with him at the moment. Maybe there was another way. Alexander dodged another attack, and then he saw something on the demon. On the back where the tentacle was sticking out was the skin where it was attached. It looked weak and therefore valuable. The problem was getting there. A frontal charge wouldn't work, and it was too quick to attack from the sides and behind. This thing was no all might, but still really quick to move on the spot. He then stared at the tentacle again. Maybe he could use it as a way to get close to its back. Alexander jumped down from the building and landed on the street. He then taunted the demon. Come on, big, ugly lady. I am standing right here. The demon fell for the taunt. It swung downwards with the tentacle and hit Alexander so strong it caused a small dust cloud. The two men hiding behind the trash can gasped in fear, and the demon grinned. However, the grin disappeared when the smoke dissipated to reveal a very much alive and bloodied up Alexander holding on to its tentacle with its thorns sticking into his right arm. What? Surprised? He said. Well, if that is the case, then you'll absolutely love my next trick. Alexander then nimble and swiftly started climbing the limb, his hands and legs getting cut in every time he moved due to the thorns it had. Just what do you think you are doing? It screamed at him and tried to slash at him with its long, sharp arms. But this was to no effect as Alexander dodged its attacks and climbed fast. It got to a point where the demon was no longer able to reach him, and he also came to where the tentacle was attached by the weak skin to the body of the demon. Alexander then proceeded to shoot at the weak spot with one pistol, and the demon roared in pain and started shaking itself to try to get him off, which did not work. Alexander sheathed his pistol, and by using his strength, he pulled the tentacle apart from the weak skin. It worked, and the demon roared in even more pain and became weaker as a result. Alexander then saw that the inside of the socket was what looked like every valuable glowing flesh. He drew his pistols while balancing on the demon and started unloading a volley of bullets that, for maximum effect, he had imbued the pistols with his demonic energy. The demon's pain increased and increased until it was no longer able to resist, struggling to get the brat of its back, and it fell to the ground on the verge of death. Alexander jumped to the front of the demon and aimed his guns at it again. Tired? He teased. You, the demon said, its voice weaker than before. You are not human, are you? Those things you pulled, I could feel it. Humans may have gotten a bit stronger in the last few decades, but you are different. You are one of us, you are a demon. The two men who hiding could not believe what they had seen and was trying to listen in, but they couldn't hear anything solid from where they were. Alexander smiled. Well, you are half right. He told the demon, I am the son of the legendary Dark Lord. He announced. The demon's eyes became wide, and its pure crimson eyes stared in horror at the young man. The demon had heard rumors. Was this really the son of Kain? In its head it imagined a vague image of the Dark Lord himself standing behind the young man and staring at it also like the young man. It couldn't be true, could it? The accursed traitor had offspring? The demon got its act together, and rage fueled the last specks of strength it had left and tried to attack Alexander, all while screaming, Philahi half-breed. Just as its right arm came at Alexander, he then fired of a shot from one of his guns at its face and staggered. Alexander then began firing of countless shot into the face, and slowly but surely the demon began losing its remaining health before it finally died and dissipated into dusty smoke. The two animal-headed men watched in fear as the smoke traveled through the air and then vanished into nothing. Alexander sheathed his pistol into his coat and walked over to them. With a cheerful smile he said to them, That goes to show that every rose has its thorns, and sometimes absolutely disgusting ones. Ah! The two men screamed in terror and ran as fast as they could away from Alexander. Alexander chuckled. Whenever a situation like this, he usually just got mistaken for an insane killer and let Darda handle any police report that may or may not come out of it. Alexander looked over his shoulder to check the collateral damage that may have occurred. But to his surprise, he saw that only a few chunks of rock and torn asphalt that was debris. Holy SHT, that is a new record, he thought. He then also felt something behind him. Alexander turned to yet another surprise. A ball of white bright light was hovering in the air. Wow, for real? Alexander thought and reached out with his right arm. Sometimes when a power demon dies in combat, there is the chance for the remaining energy that is left to then be used by others. In rare cases, a demon can do this willingly and pass their strength on to others if they find that someone was worthy of their power. Luckily for Alexander, his unique heritage meant he could manipulate energy like this to his purpose. With his extended arm, the light ball then flew into his right hand and began to form. When the light dimed down, the leftover energy had transformed into a weapon, better known as a devil arm. And devil arms were highly priced by Darda. This one looked like a WHP. The WHP-like devil arm was covered in spikes that glow blue when in use, from handle to the tip where dagger blade was attached. Alexander got into a cool fighting pose and immediately began testing out by swinging the WHP devil arm around. It had a pretty good range, and it was strong when he then also tore up asphalt with crack and swing with the wipe he made. After doing it a few times, Alexander nudged the wipe back into his hand and finished off with a cool pose with hundreds of small tiny pebbles fell around him, not a single touching his person. Alexander then looked at the devil arm wipe and took off the bandana covering his lower face. So, what should I call you? He muttered. But just then he heard police sirens coming. Those two from before must have called them. Alexander then used an air hike circle to get to the rooftop again. He hunched over so he wouldn't get noticed and watched for a bit. About 3 police cars came driving down accompanied by 3 heroes. One was this huge lady known as Mount Lady. Another was a man dressed in wooden armor mixed with a blue hero suit. He was known as Kamui Woods. The last was big muscled man known as Death Arms, not to be confused with Devil Arms, which are weapons. All rapid raising heroes in the country. Alexander then jumped off the building and landed in another ally. He then left the area and called up Miss Calhoun to inform her the job was done. Having completed a mission after a long while was nice and thrilling. The next day, the school was called off to get everyone a small break after the USH attack. Alexander spent all just day cleaning his weapons at home and sew the holes in his favorite trench coat together. Meanwhile, the news were all over the attack and gave a whole segment that night and the following morning. 2 days after the USH, the students returned and things returned to normal, or as normal could be. All the classmates of Class 1 were sitting at their tables before class was supposed to start. The invisible girl Hagakure asked many the class, excitingly, "Did you watch the news last night?" "Yeah," Ojiro, who was sitting on the same row as Shoji and Hagakure, responded. It was so cool that we got a few seconds of screen time, though I doubt any noticed me anyway, hanging out in the background. It was strong being invisible. Probably not, Shoji said. Ojiro nervously chuckled. Hee, it's easy to stand out when you just gloves. Kaminari took this time to feel greater than he was. We are totally big deals. Those news channels love us. We are basically celebrities. Kirishima, who was sitting behind him, agreed casually. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Gyro, who was also near, damped the hype down. Get over yourselves. The hero course that pump out pros was attack, and that is what they care about. Who know what would happen to us if the teachers hadn't shown up? Zero said. I would probably kicked all of them, Alexander thought. Minta took it differently. Why would you say that? I am going to pee myself just thinking about it. He was obviously still scared because of how stressful the situation was. Bakugou didn't like hearing his whining. Oh, shut up. Grow a pair, loser, he yelled at him. Freighting Might and Midoriya to an extent. Man, so cool how villains left so fast with their tails between their legs. Sato said, fisticuffing imaginary enemies. Yes, though we fought too. I believe it was our teachers that finally scared them completely. Takoyami said. Ida suddenly came sprinting through the door. Attention, homeroom class is about to begin. Everyone, stop talking and take your seats, he yelled. We are all setting, Kirishima informed him. Yeah, you are the only standing, Zero then said. In embarrassment, Ida quickly sat down. Dang it, he muttered. While Uraraka simply told him it was nothing to worry about. Don't sweat it. Ashido, the pink girl, leaned backwards to Isui, the frog girl. Hey Tsu, who do you think is going to teach class today? I don't know. Mr. Aizawa is still in the hospital recovering from his injuries, Tsu said. Just then, the door to the class opened, and to everyone's shock, it was in fact Mr. Aizawa himself, covered in medical bandages. Morning class, he said through the bandages wrapped around his face. Mr. Aizawa, what are you doing here? The class shouted. They didn't expect him to up and about already. Whoa, what a pro, Kaminari said, still shocked to a degree. Meanwhile, Kirishima admired his manliness. Mr. Aizawa, I am glad that you are okay, Ida yelled. You call that okay? Uraraka asked. He looked like he was dressed up as an Egyptian mummy for Halloween. I mean, they wouldn't let him leave the hospital if he was healed, right? Kikuchi said. Unless he is more stubborn than we thought, and he'll refuse to let anything stand in the way of him and his paycheck. Alexander joked. Aizawa finally got his teacher's table in front of the blackboard. My well-being is irrelevant. What's more important is that your fight isn't over, he then said. Immediately some student became frightened. Were there still villains? Aizawa paused. A sports festival is about to begin. Yes, Kirishima said silently. Thank God it wasn't villains. The class broke out into excitement over hearing the news. The sports festival, the class yelled. Let's go kick some butt, Kirishima shouted excitingly. And he was then pushed in the face by Kaminari. Wait a sec. Gyro then asked Mr. Aizawa, is it really such a good idea to hold the sports festival so soon after the villains snuck inside? They could attack once we are all in the same place. Ojiro agreed. Mr. Aizawa then told them. Apparently, the administration thinks this is a good way to show that the threat has been handled, and our school is safer than ever. Plus, they are beefing up security compared to last year's. This event is huge opportunity for all students of UA. It's not something we can cancel because of a few villains. The nervous Minta asked. I am sorry, but why not? It's just the sports festival. Midoriya turned around a little confused. Huh? Minta, don't you know how important this sports competition is? Of course, I do. I just don't want to get murdered, Minta explained. Alexander had this confused look on his face because he had no idea what the class and the teacher were talking about. So, he then raised a hand and asked, excuse me, sir, Mr. Aizawa, what is the sports festival? At that moment every classmate turned their attention to Alexander and gazed at him with baffled eyes, which made Alexander himself even more confused. Did he say something wrong? Why, you don't know the sports festival? Kikuchi asked. No, Alexander said. Dude, how can you not know about the sports festival? Didn't you watch television as kid? Kaminari asked. Alexander quickly thought of a lie. No, I haven't owned a TV until I got to this country. Okay, perhaps that lie was not the greatest. The class was very surprised. What? Then what did you do as a child for fun? Kirishima asked. Alexander groaned in annoyance. Can I just get an answer, please? He asked in a raised voice. Let me explain to you then, Mr. Aizawa said. Our sports festival is one of the most watched events in the entire world. In the past, everyone obsessed over the Olympic Games, but then quirks started appearing. Now the Olympics have been drastically reduced in terms of scale and viewership. For anyone who cares about competition, there is only one tournament that matters, a sports festival. The whole class started getting in on explaining the festival to Alexander. That's right, and top heroes everywhere will be watching. This is where you get scouted, Yayurazu said with much confidence. She is right. After graduating, a lot of people join pro agencies as a sidekick, Kaminari said. That is true, but that is as far as some people go. They miss their chance to go independent and stay enteral sidekicks. Actually, that's probably where Kaminari here is heading, Gyro said, and taunting Kaminari in the process. They are speaking true, Alexander. Famous hero agencies can garner better experience and popularity. That's why the festival matters and is important, Kawalksik. If you want to go pro one day, then this can open a path for you. 1 chance a year, 3 chance in a lifetime. No aspiring hero can afford to miss this festival. Mr. Aizawa finished explaining. So, Mr. Kawalksik, that about explained everything. Alexander processed the info he had gotten, and then with a blank facial expression, he said, That sounds like a waste of time. As soon as he muttered those very words, a big chunk of the classmate fell out of their seats. Even Kikuchi, who was sitting at the table next to his. It would be comical if were it not for the fact that it was very serious. Ida being one of the people who fell out of the seats. Alexander, this is one of the most important parts of the semester. What part of it don't you understand that well? The part where I have to entertain people, instead of, learning how to be a hero, Alexander said. I am sorry, I thought this was the hero course for saving people and arresting bad guys. Not the next heroic top model. Unbelievable. Most likely the best fighter in the class was not interested in one biggest events of the school. The one that constantly talked and outperformed nearly everyone wasn't trying to gain popularity to further his hero career. Well, unfortunately for you, specifically. You still have to go to festival and participate. Mr. Aizawa said and confused everyone in the room. Why? Alexander asked. I heard about how you defied All Might's orders and engaged combat with the top villains that were leading the attack the other day. Rules exist for a reason, and the school board won't agree in training someone who breaks the rules. Your action could have caused more damage rather than doing good. Someone could have gotten seriously hurt or worse. To redeem yourself in the teacher's eyes, we need you to show great effort in the sports festival. In other words, you need to participate in the sports festival if you want to keep your stay here at UA, Aizawa said. The teachers were really considering kicking him out. Alexander gritted his teeth a bit. He had a job to do, and he needed to do it. Getting kicked out this earlier would not be good for Darda or himself. Fine, I'll do it. I'll participate in this dumb festival, he said in a slightly annoyed tone. Smart choice. Now, get ready for the upcoming event. Also, the rest of you better not slack off on your training, Aizawa said. Yes, sir, the class then said. Later in the day, after the class have had a session with the hero Cementos, they went on to their break. That villain stuff SCK sure, but I am pumped for these games, Kirishima shouted up into the air. We put on a good show, and we are basically on the road to being pros. Zero equaled hyped as Kirishima, and it didn't stop there. Yet this is why I am even here in the first place, Sato said, smashing his fists together. We get so few chances. We have to make the most of it, Tokoyami said. Oh man, Ojiro, I am getting kind of nervous about the festival, Hagakure said to the tail guy. I have to come up with a way to get noticed. Ojiro responded. Sure. Maybe you should look at a shiner costume. Otherwise, you are going to have to work really strong. My what is a boy to do, Aoyama the elegant of the class? I am standing out even when I am standing still. That means that the scouts won't be able to take their eyes off me. He was a very self-centered person. Unfortunately, the student Koda, the one with the power to control animals, was in his vicinity. He was a shy guy and he had no idea on how to deal with a person like Aoyama. Don't you agree? Koda just nodded to do something. Kaminari sighed heavily. You are so lucky, Shoji. People are bound to notice your unique quirk. Sure, but what matters is I show how useful I can be, Shoji said. No doubt, you'll make a scene too. Gyro joked, much Kaminari's anger. Meanwhile, in the back of the class, Midoriya, Ida, and Alexander were listening to all the options from their classmates. This is going to be nuts. Everyone is so excited. Midoriya said after hearing how the class felt about the sports festival. Well, yeah, of course we are, Ida said and got up from his chair. We enrolled at this school with the sole aim to become heroes, so naturally we are all getting fired up, he said while doing some type dance, a very unstylish one. Wow, Ida, those are some interesting moves, Sue commented, who was not too far away. You two have to be as well, right? Ida asked Midoriya and Alexander. Well, yeah, of course I am. And also nervous, Midoriya said, his angst showing through his expression. No, I rather fight another villain attack instead of this festival, Alexander said, very unmotivated. Alexander, I don't understand why you are not excited, Midoriya said. I mean, you are so talented and all, though you would jump at the chance to show off. Oh, not trying to sound mean in any regard. No worries, I just dislike that everything about being a pro depends on getting popular. Honestly, I don't care about it at all. I don't need others to tell me that I am a great fighter. Combating bad guys is why I am here, not because of some silly games, Alexander said. And of course he was under orders by the organization he worked for. Really? I didn't think of it like that. Considering the way you taunt and perform cool moves, Ida said. Alexander smiled. That's just how I fight, man. It's more personal satisfaction than anything. Listen, you guys, I just want to graduate here. If I just do decently, there will be no problem with the teachers, right? You guys do what you feel you have to. Don't expect me to do much more than that in the festival. Ida placed his right hand on his chin. Well, no matter how much I tell how important this festival is, I can't force you to like it. Just know the rest of us will do hardest to compete. I'll be rooting for you both then, Alexander then said. Guys, they heard and turned to see Uraraka standing next to them. She was not looking like she usually does. Her expression was that determination, fierceness, and slightly grim. It was practically fuming of her. Let's do our best in the sports festival, her voice also more serious. Uraraka, what happened to your face? Midoriya asked, slightly frightened. Ashido commented. Seriously, what's up? You are normally like the most laid-back girl ever. Mainta, who was also nearby, was about to an inappropriate comment but was slapped by Sue's frog tongue. It was then that Uraraka became more dramatically excited and fist bump up in the air. She then announced to the rest. Everyone, I am going to do my best. Yeah, Ida, Midoriya, Ashido, and Sue said, feeling pumped up. It was then that Kikuchi came down. Hey, what are you goo? Uraraka then turned in a manner that slightly frightened Kikuchi. Kikuchi, I am going to do my best. Kikuchi didn't know what to do and simply mimicked what she did with a fist pump of her own. Yeah. Uraraka then did another fierce turn and looked at some of the other guys. I said I am going to do my best. They in turn mimicked like Kikuchi but more nervously. Was she losing it? Uraraka then did yet another turn. Alex, I am going to do my best. Alexander sat just looking at her with a blank, not showing any emotion whatsoever. You do that, he said and kicked back on his chair. Uraraka did yet another turn and tried rallying people again. Now that Midoriya thought about it, there was something he had been meaning to ask her. After the next session, it was time for their lunch break. Outside in the hall, Midoriya, Alexander, Ida, Uraraka, and Kikuchi. Midoriya asked Uraraka, Hey Uraraka. What up? She replied. I was wondering. What made you decide to come to UA? He asked. Oh, she said, and then told all of them the reason. For the money. For the money? Midoriya asked, confused. You want to be a hero so you can get rich? Hey, I am doing it for money too, Alexander commented. Sure, but it doesn't sound like Uraraka to say something like that, Kikuchi commented to Alexander's. Really, Uraraka, you are here because of cash? She then asked her. If we are cutting to the case, then yeah. Uraraka was very embarrassed, and it then showed when she waved her hand furiously. I am sorry if it sounds greedy, Deku. You two have such admirable motivations. I hope any of you don't think any less of me now. Ida couldn't disagree more. Not at all. Your goal is to support your well-being, which is a perfect, admirable reason to have. Alexander turned to Midoriya and Kikuchi. You heard that? I am also admirable in the pursuit money. He slightly snickered. Uraraka sighed. Well, you see, you guys, my parents own a construction company, but we haven't gotten any work lately, so we are flat broke. Anyway, this isn't usually what I tell other people, but... Before she could talk more, Ida and Midoriya both went into a thinking position and started brainstorming. All while Alexander and Kikuchi were observing them. Construction, eh? Ida said. Midoriya came upon a brilliant thought. If she got licensed, I bet she could use her quirk to gain costumers. She could bring costs down a lot. And they could sell their heavy lifting equipment. She could float everything. Ida said. I know, right? Uraraka said. I have been telling Dad that since I was a kid. She paused for a moment. But Uraraka remembered back to her childhood. You want to work for us. When I grow up all big and strong, I'll you and Mummy out any way I can. I really appreciate the thought, Achako. But as your dad, I'd be even happier if you pursue your own dreams. That's the way to make us happy. And if you do make money, you can take us to Hawaii or something. Daddy. Uraraka clenched her fists, formed a determined expression. I am going to become a pro. I'll sign up with a good agency and make plenty of money. And give my parents an easy life. Her speech was really driving to hear. Ida felt so touched by her words that he gave a big applause. That is appealing, so noble, bravo, bravo. And Kikuchi joined in on the clapping as well. Alexander gave a thumbs up. She is not after a heroic future fantasy, she is more grounded anyone, Midoriya thought. Alexander looked to his side at Kikuchi. So why did you join? WH? Oh, Kikuchi said, and Alexander noted with a raised eyebrow her sudden shift in tone when he asked her. However, before he could ask further. Midoriya is here. They all heard and saw All Might come around the corner pointing at Midoriya. All except Alexander were pretty wide-eyed. Wow, All Might. What are you doing here? Midoriya asked, surprised. Launch. All Might answered and pulled out a little launch box packed inside a little handkerchief. You want to eat with me? Uraraka and Kikuchi nearly spasmed when they saw how weirdly cute All Might looked. What do you say? All Might asked. Midoriya got the nods from the rest, and he went on his way with All Might while the others went to the cafeteria. While the cafeteria, they all got in line for getting food. I wonder what he wanted with Deku. Uraraka pondered. I heard that when All Might was attacked by villains during the Asage incident, Midoriya tried to stop them himself. Perhaps this was about. Ida said. Hey Alexander, you were there close to the action. Did Midoriya do that? Kikuchi asked Alexander, who was standing behind her. Yeah, All Might had just punched that bird brain out the and looked a little worse for wear. Alexander said. Kind of heroic of him, I think, even if it was a bit reckless. Kikuchi said. Alexander chuckled. I would like if there was a situation where I didn't have to find Midoriya all broken up afterwards. Seems to happen to him a lot. Kikuchi then rotated her head forward again, and her hair flew in and gently touched Alexander's nose and mouth. For a moment his eyes widened when he suddenly felt a nice aroma being smelled, and his heart skipped a beat, and he was overwhelmed by a feeling in his chest. In that moment Alexander simply stood looking at the back of her head. The feeling disappeared as he then rubbed his face to snap out of the wired trance he was in. Was that? He thought as he looked at her back head again. Ida began talking again. Also remember what Isui said on the bus. That power of yours, isn't it a lot like All Might's? Since their quirks are so similar, it is possible that he has taken a liking to him. How lucky, Ida finished saying. What Ida and the other didn't know was that Todoroki was listening in. All Might and Midoriya, huh? Alexander looked at the menu again, and he still couldn't fully read Japanese yet. You guys wouldn't happen to recommend anything, would you? Why, Uraraka? Oh, I am just wondering. Maybe you guys like something that you think that I would like, Alexander said. How about some sushi, Uraraka suggested. Sushi? Isn't that just raw fish and rice? Alexander asked. Well, yeah, but it's better than one would expect, Kikuchi said. Thanks but no thanks. Any other recommendations? Alexander asked. Besides sushi, there is also well-made burgers you can get, Ida said. Immediately Alexander went. Wait, they do sell burgers here? Meanwhile, with All Might and Midoriya inside a private room. All Might was in his weakened form, and he looked at Midoriya with serious eyes. It's something that the pros know. The entire country will be watching very closely. All Might had told Midoriya how his time in his muscular form has been shortened to only around 50 minutes. Midoriya felt bad, but All Might told him not to worry. However, that was not the only thing he said. All Might then talked about the sports festival and how important it was that he made impression at it. Think of the sports festival as your debut. You are the fledgling symbol of peace. The next All Might, izukumidoriya. The atmosphere was intense, enough to give a grown man goosebumps, as the words came from All Might themselves. You must introduce yourself to the world, and proudly say I am here. But All Might, that's your catchphrase. Besides, what can I do? You know how the sports festival is set up, right? All Might asked. Well, yeah, of course. The students are divided by class year, and the support, business, general studies, and hero course all fight against each other in a bunch of preliminary trials. Whoever makes it through the initial games face off in the finals. It's basically a big round and about tournament. Right, All Might shouted. Meaning you'll have plenty opportunity to sell yourself. I guess. Midoriya said so casually that All Might fell backwards with the coach he was sitting in. Sorry. I mean, what you are saying is absolutely correct. But honestly, it's kind of strong to get really excited about this after that just happened at the USG Plus. I already got the world's greatest hero teaching me so the festival. Midoriya went on his endless long muttering sessions again. At some All Might with a bloody mouth from his untold operations said out loud, Man, nobody is better at spouting word vomit than you, kid. Oh hey, are you okay? Midoriya stopped rambling and asked with slight nervous face. All Might at him from the ground. Some heroes always aim for the top, while others happily settle. The difference between those two mindsets has a big impact on how far you make it in the real world. I understand how you feel. I might even projecting a bit of myself onto you. However, I hope you haven't forgotten the emotion you felt on the beach that day during our training. The talk with All Might left him with questions that he needed to ask himself. But did he have the answers? Later in the afternoon. For some reason or another, a whole bunch or mass of students had gathered outside Class 1A's homeroom as they were about to leave. Why the heck are you all here? Uraraka shouted. Do you students have some sort of business with our class? Ida asked them. Why are you blocking our doorway? I won't let you hold us hostage, Minta shouted. Bakugou came up behind them. They are checking out the competition. Idiots. We are the class that survived a real villain attack. Bakugou walked up to the door. Now you know what a pro looks like. Now move it, extras, he said to the other students, antagonizing all of them. Immediately some of his classmates try do something. You can't go around calling people extras just because you don't know who they are, Ida yelled at him for his bad manner. So, this Class 1A. A student with lazy eyes and purple-blue hair said, making his way through the big crowd of other students. I heard you guys were impressive. But you just sound like an but. Is everyone in the hero course delusional or just you? Bakugou got really annoyed and his classmates could see it. How sad that I come here and find a bunch of egomaniacs. He rubbed his own neck before continuing. I wanted to be in the hero course. But like many others here, I was forced to choose a different track, such as life. I didn't cut it the first time around, but I have another chance. If any of us, Students outside the hero course do well in the sports festival, the teachers can decide to transfer us to the hero course. And they'll have to pull people out to make room. The student of class 1 became a little alarmed when they heard that. Scouting the competition? Maybe some of my peers are. But I am here to let you know that if you don't bring very best, I'll steal your spot right from under you. Consider this a declaration of war. Oh, shut up, would you? Alexander said with a smile. The class and the rest of the students then saw him walk up to the doorway. Alex? Uraraka said curiously. The purple blue-haired student said to him. What, got something to say? Oh yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I just wanted to say that you are a massive hypocrite. You call all of us egotists, and yet all you have been doing is talk about yourself and try to give us a sob story why it's just oh so sad that you didn't get to be a part of the hero course. You didn't come here to declare war. You came here to whine because you are jealous. Jealous of us. Jealous of I don't. Maybe your quirk is not optimized for combat. All while going on about how lucky we are. Here is the real truth of the matter. You don't know a thing about any of us. So, what? You just came expecting to scare us or something? Well, I don't know what to tell you other than you failed miserably. Now what I need you and the rest of you to do is kindly make a path, so we can get home for today. Alexander finished saying. The students outside were baffled, his classmates a bit stunned, and that purple-haired student gritted his teeth in annoyance. He had been outplayed in a sense. However, the students outside the classroom had not moved an inch, so what Alexander then did was that he in a quick manner shook his body forward and said, "Boo," in a very not scary tone. But it worked. The students were still scared, and they separated and opened up a narrow path that Class 1 could go in. Alexander then extended his right arm and said to Bakugou, "Here you go, Bakugou," he said with childish grin. "I didn't need your help a whole. I could have dealt with them myself," Bakugou shouted right into Alexander's face, but he was not too bothered by it. "Hey you," another voice said, and head popped up in the crowd. It was a student with white hair, and there was something wrong with his eyes. "I am from Class 1B next door to you. We heard you fought some villains, and I came to see if that was true. But you are just a bunch of brats. You think you are better than us." Thanks to a little help from Bakugou and Alexander, everyone hated them. Bakugou and Alexander looked at the 1B student, before Bakugou then started walking through the path of students that Alexander had made possible. "Hey, don't you ignore me." Kirishima came around the corner to catch Bakugou. "Dude, where are you going? You know it, both Alexander's and yours fault they are mad at us." Bakugou looked over his shoulder. "These people don't matter," he said, confusing Kirishima. "The only thing that is important is that I beat them." Bakugou then walked home. Midoriya took note of what he said, and many of the students began leaving. "Oh man, that was so manly exit," Kirishima said, admiring Bakugou's determination. "Yeah, you said it," Sato agreed. "We have to beat them. He wasn't wrong." Tokoyami also agreed. "Yeah, sure, but this SCK, you two made us enemies of everyone." Alexander, Kaminari complained. "I just told what was true. It is not my fault that guy was thinking highly of himself," Alexander said. "Don't you think high of yourself?" Yayurazu asked. "Hey, I never said I was perfect," Alexander admitted, shrugging his shoulders all carefree. Meanwhile, Midoriya was thinking back to that time right after the simulation battle where he made a vow to himself before Bakugou, nearly exposing that he had gotten All Might quirk in the process. But luckily for him and Bakugou had no idea what he was talking about. However, Bakugou also made a vow to himself that day. He was going to become the best. "You won't beat me again. I am just getting started. Got that? I am gonna end up the #1 hero, no matter what." It kind of gave him a gut punch. Everyone was so determined to prove their worth. If he wants to be a pro hero that he wanted to be, then he needed to look further than most. Perhaps everyone. Kikuchi looked at Alexander. Even though she has now been in the class for a little while now and had a basic idea of his overall power, there was still so much about him that she didn't know, and she was not sure if liked it. Over the next few days, everyone started training strong to get ready for the sports festival. They wanted to be prepared for all possibilities. Even in their off time, many trained. But not everyone was out training strong. One of the days before the festival, Alexander sat in his coach at home. The clock had already passed 18 p.m. He was bored out of his mind, so he then decided to go something else. He was going to see his neighbor. Alexander exited the house and locked the door. He then moved over to the door that led into Midoriya residence. Meanwhile, Midoriya sat in his room viewing a video of All Might saving people. It was a video he used to watch all the time when he was little. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. "Izuku, you mind getting the door, sweetie?" his mother yelled. "Yeah, I get it," he yelled back and went to the door. Midoriya opened the door and saw that it was Alexander standing there. "Hey man, what's going on?" he waved. Midoriya was surprised. "Alex, what are you doing here?" he asked. "Well, we have been neighbors for a while now, and you still haven't invited me over. So, I thought I'd just invite myself. If you don't mind it, that is," the secret half-demon said. No. Sure, come in, I just didn't expect anyone to come here today," Midoriya said. Midoriya's mother called from the kitchen. "Izuku, who is it?" Midoriya responded. "Is a friend from school, mom." "Oh, I'll be right there," she yelled back. Alexander then asked, "Is it just you and your mother?" Midoriya was about to explain. "Yeah, it is, you see my—" However, his mother then came around the corner. "Sorry. Hello, I am Inko Midoriya, Izuku's mother," she said, going for a handshake. The woman was just your everyday house mother, but Alexander could easily see the traits that Midoriya Izuku had too. Alexander happily accepted the handshake. Alexander Kowalczyk. "I am the transfer student from Russia." Inko knew that name. "Oh yes, my son has told me about you. He tells me you're a great fighter. Anyways, we about to have dinner, would you like to join us? I think we have enough for 3. Inko offered. "Sure. I haven't eaten yet," Alexander said. "Great. Izuku, why don't you show your friend around the house?" Inko said and walked back in the kitchen. "Okay, Mom." Midoriya turned his head back to Alexander only to realize that he was not there. "Where did?" "So this is your room?" Midoriya heard Alexander's voice behind him. He quickly turned around to see Alexander standing in front of the door to his room and opened it. "No, wait," Midoriya said in a minor yell, but to no avail as Alexander stepped into his room. Midoriya's room was filled up with action figures, posters, and merchandise of All Might. Was he obsessed or something? Heck, maybe he was possessed by a demon, and he would have to do an exorcism later, Alexander thought, very amused by the sight. "I knew you were a fanboy man. But this is something else." He snickered. Midoriya extremely embarrassed. Yeah, I am a bit of a fan to say the least." "A bit?" Alexander questioned with very judging eyes, and Midoriya just rubbed the back of his head. Alexander then looked around the home some more and got the layout of the place. "It a nice place you got here, man. Way better than the place I had back in the motherland," Alexander remarked. "Yep, lived here all my life," Midoriya said. Alexander then asked, "I never really got to ask you. What did you and All Might talk about?" Midoriya stammered. "Oh, nothing special. He just gave me some advice on how to better control my quirk." Alexander sensed that was more to it, but he didn't press further. "Well, anything useful. I would imagine that you should already have found out a way to get control of your quirk before you enrolled." Midoriya quickly thought over what he should say. Alexander had been a great supporter, but telling him everything would not be right, and he betray All Might's trust. He was technically going to tell the truth, but also lie. "Actually, my quirk manifested only a few months ago," he told him. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What? I thought everyone's quirk was supposed to manifest at an early age." "Well, I guess that I am an oddball then," Midoriya rubbed his neck again. Suddenly his mother in the kitchen called again. "Izuku, can you come help with the rice?" Midoriya ran out to her. "Sorry, Alexander, gotta help out. Coming." Alexander watched as Midoriya ran in to help out his mother. Suddenly he was reminded of the time when his mother was still alive. It was when him and his own mother Beatrice, a appealing black-haired woman, was making food when he accidentally cut himself. But he has had his demonic powers since his BRTH, so the knife left no wound or lasting scar. But the cut still hurt, and he had a few tears coming down his cheeks. "I won't cry, this is nothing," he said, gritting his teeth. Back then he was not as used to pain as now. His mother came over and put her hands over his. Alexander, only true devils never cry. Your tears are proof of your humanity. Alexander snapped out of his memory and returned to the present. He looked at the hand that he was once cut in, but then he noticed Midoriya coming out again. Hey, the food is ready, please come join us, he said. Alexander responded with a smile. Great, what are we having? Later, after eating with the Midoriya family. It was so nice that you came over, Alexander. I can see how you made friends with Izuku, Inko said. Hey, I should thank you, not the other way around. That was some nice food you made, Alexander said, feeling stuff. Even though it was not burger, it was still good. I hope you do well in the upcoming festival. Now, if you excuse me, I better go clean up. Good night, Kawalksik. Inko Midoriya waved goodbye and left the entrance hall, leaving Midoriya and Alexander alone. I'd better head the hay back in my apartment room. Later, Midoriya, Alexander said and opened the out. Right, see you later, Alex, Midoriya replied. However, before Alexander closed the door, he looked over the shoulder. She is a good parent, your mother. Midoriya stood still, a little confused. Take good care of each other, he said, closing the door, going home. Midoriya stood pondering why Alexander said that, until he remembered that Alexander had lost his family. Maybe that's why he said it. God knows what he himself would do if he ever lost his mother. Midoriya then pushed those ugly thoughts away. He needed to still concentrate for the sports festival. There were only a few days left. A lot of his dreams were riding on this. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Speckters on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.